Almost 1/4 of all goods that go between the U.S. and Canada pass through Windsor, Ontario. But that's just the beginning of the relationship between that city and neighboring Detroit. And it's only a partial view of what's dynamic in Ontario's largest border city. With us tonight for a fuller view in Windsor, Ontario, Craig Pearson. He's the managing editor at the Windsor Star. And Sarah Mushtag. She's a community activist and named as one of this year's top 40 under 40 by the Windsor Essex County United Way. And here in our studio, Janice Caffer, President and CEO of Windsor's Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare, and Sean McAuliffe, Toronto Star columnist, co-founder of Spacing Magazine, and a Windsor expat. And it's good to have you two here in our studio in Toronto, and to our friends on the line down in Windsor, Ontario. Glad to have you along as well. I'm going to get the managing editor of the Star to get us started here because, here in the Greater Toronto Area, when the news about General Motors hit, we know what the reaction was here. I want to know what the reaction was down in Windsor, Ontario. You didn't lose jobs there, but clearly the relationship between the two cities is profound. So go ahead.
Well, the reaction down in Windsor was one of shock as well, I can tell you. And that's because you have to remember the auto industry is very interconnected. So we have part suppliers that supply parts to Oshawa. And furthermore, it was a bit more than that because they closed some plants in the States, including 2 in the Detroit area that we also have some part suppliers supplying to. So it was a big deal. Such a big deal, I should point out, that Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens said in his inauguration address this week that because of what happened in GM, he's very concerned about Windsor. We have to diversify the economy as soon as possible. And by the way, he rewrote that address. He wasn't going to talk about that, but as soon as GM announced that they were closing the Oshawa plant, about 10 minutes after that, he changed his idea on what he was going to talk about, and he spent the whole time talking about the need to diversify the Windsor economy and that they're going to contribute more funds now to the Windsor Essex Development Corporation. And to do that, they want to try to attract more jobs, different industries to Windsor.
Right. Sarah, I want to get your take. In the circles in which you travel, what was the reaction when GM made their news about Oshawa?
I'm in a circle with a bunch of young professionals, have a lot of friends who are engineers and working for some of the big 3 automakers in Detroit. So it is a concern for people living here. I think it's also a concern for young people who want to stay in Windsor because you see what happens in Oshawa, and like Craig mentioned, you wonder, can you stay in Windsor, have a good paying job, and raise a family here as well? So it's definitely a concern for young people, and it's a concern for, I think, Windsor Essex as a whole, and how are we going to retain young people and ensure that they stay here.
Sean, let's talk about your mom. Where does she used to work?
My mom worked at the General Motors trim plant in Windsor, which is now an empty lot. She worked there for 20 years. And when the announcement of Oshawa came, it all felt very familiar. When you have a parent, you know somebody, if you live in Windsor, you know somebody that works in an auto plant or an auto plant supplier, and you kind of always expect this to come. It's almost like an earthquake that, you live in Los Angeles, the big one's going to come. So when the big one came, it is the shock, but it's not a surprise. And I kind of felt it, the deja vu again in Oshawa, because we felt it in Windsor. My mom felt it when the plant closed, and now GM doesn't exist in Windsor, which is almost unthinkable 10, 20 years ago.
I don't want to exaggerate this, Janice, but is there a sense that when you live in Windsor right now that your head's almost in the guillotine? You're just sort of waiting for the next chop to come down? Is it that kind of thing?
No, not for all of us, and certainly not in my own opinion. I think the mayor did a really good job in his inaugural address. He talked about the fact that we have a contract, a really good, solid contract with good working jobs in our city until at least 2025. And I think what his address was, and I think Craig referenced, he ripped up his original one, and it's kind of like a call to arms, and in many ways an opportunity for the city to kind of come together and find a way to ensure that we are continuing on our diversification strategies, continuing to move forward. There's a lot of time that will pass. I mean, 7 years. We're in 2018, and we have a contract and guaranteed work, or pretty much guaranteed work, until 2025. Mm-hmm. I think what he was saying was, we need to really think about it, and we need to realize that what happened in Oshawa could happen in Oshawa. But I don't think
Windsor.
In Windsor. Mm-hmm. Windsor's never been a defeatist city. It's never been a city that kind of folds their cards and walks away from the table. So I don't think that's going to happen here either.
Sarah, can we talk a bit about your family? Why don't you tell us, how'd you get to Windsor in the first place?
We moved to Windsor from the States in 2001, and I think it's a pretty common story. There are a lot of people from Windsor who've either moved here from the States or moved back to the States. And after moving here, my dad still works in the States, and we travel there pretty often as well. And so the border is obviously a huge concern. We want to ensure that the border is easy to travel through and that jobs still exist in Detroit. I think the Chamber of Commerce estimates here that there's about 5,000 to 6,000 people who cross the border every day for work, and my dad, as well as many other, are one of those people.
Your dad's one of those people. How long does it take him to cross the border every day?
So he's pretty fortunate since he's been crossing so often that the officers know him pretty well and they know that he's going for work. And so it doesn't take him much time at all. Post 9/11, it did take a lot of time. My dad's also a visible minority. He identifies as Muslim. So those things weren't necessarily in his favor after 9/11. Now, all these years later, it has gotten much better.
I want Craig to bring you back into the discussion here because one of the things we're hearing about many cities and smaller towns, of course, across the province of Ontario is there's an opioid crisis. And I want you to give us a sense about what that looks like on the streets of Windsor, Ontario.
The opioid crisis in Windsor is particularly stark these days. Many studies show that we have a higher than average use of opioids and a higher than average death rate. The crime in Windsor, which has normally been a city that really doesn't have that bad crime, has spiked in 2018. We have had 9 alleged murders and 1 alleged manslaughter so far in 2018, which is huge. Normally it's perhaps 2 or 3. And most of those are related to opioids in some way. So it is a big concern. And the city has upped the ante in terms of how much they're contributing to fight the opioid crisis. But you can see it in other ways. You can see it in the homeless population. Not that every homeless person, of course, is addicted to drugs, but there does tend to be a higher percentage than average there. And so it's really rampant. I think that Janice Caffrey could probably talk to that issue to some degree.
Well,
too,
you've anticipated my
healthcare.
next question because obviously, Janice, you are in healthcare. You would have a sense of this on a daily basis. What does it look like to you?
The mental health and addictions issues that we're facing in Windsor, Essex County are issues that are being faced across Ontario. So, I think in some ways it's peaked in Windsor. We've had in one weekend, particularly, I think it was kind of the situation where we really saw that we had to come together as a community. The weekend of November 10th, we had 4 deaths in one weekend. It was initially reported as 5, but the 5th person survived. And I think
all related to opioids.
Well, that was the original thought. It was all opioids. What has since come out is that may not necessarily be true. And so in Windsor, we do have an opioid crisis. We do have an issue with homelessness in the downtown core of Windsor, and we do have issues with mental illness in our community, as every community does. I think what a lot of people don't understand is in Windsor, we actually have a higher issue with alcoholism. More people die from alcoholism, and more people are admitted to our withdrawal management center that we operate at the hospital, trying to come down and come out of and detox from alcohol. And the other issue we have a big problem with is crystal meth. And so I think Windsor, like many other cities, but the issue for us with opioids is growing, and it is becoming more and more of an issue. And part of that issue, frankly, is that we haven't had any real investment in mental health and mental illness and addiction services in our community for a very long time. And so we're kind of a bit behind the 8 ball on this one, because we're now trying to play catch up in a situation where the trends are spiking upwards every year, doubling the incidence and the issues. We're seeing a younger population being affected, more and more deaths in the younger age ranges. And we aren't seeing corresponding increases in investments in getting ahead of it. And right now our conversation in Windsor is, should we have a safe consumption and treatment site? And we don't have agreement across our community. We're still, in many ways, consumed by the idea that everyone who is suffering from and living with an addiction is a criminal. And so there's the whole criminality and the justice system
Do you treat
interface.
this as a health issue or as a crime issue?
And, you know, when you think about the decades of just say no to drugs and the war on drugs and the justice and the DEA and all of Hollywood and media, it's really hard for many people in our city and many cities to actually look at this as a health issue, that these folks need treatment and help, and that's what we should be doing.
Sarah, how do you see it?
I agree with a lot of what Janice just said. I think the conversations around the safe injection sites have been a little worrisome because most of the conversation, unfortunately, has been about, when you read the comments or you hear what people are saying, it's lock them up, you know, put them away, and we're not treating it as a public health crisis as it should be treated. I've definitely seen more drug use in my age demographic as well. A little surprised, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised by it because it does affect everyone. And on the topic of homelessness as well, I think we often talk about our downtown core as being a certain way, but poverty is all throughout Windsor-Essex region, and homelessness is as well. Sometimes it's a little hidden in other neighborhoods or other areas of the county and the area here, but it still exists there as well.
Sean, what's prompting so much opioid abuse, homelessness, all of these issues?
Yeah, it's like a kind of unstoppable wave that's affecting every community. When some of my friends who run businesses in downtown Windsor and live in downtown Windsor, I'm just watching them, you know, their Facebook posts and other social media posts discuss it, and they're so similar to discussions that happen in neighborhoods in Toronto, neighborhoods in Edmonton, and this thing is bigger than just one city. It really, in this odd way, kind of unites the country, and if we could kind of all get behind, you know, figuring out what the solution is to that. But no city's alone in that, which is, I think, important to realize.
Craig, to that end, do you think the mayor and the council are doing the right things or making the right decisions or funding programs appropriately in order to tackle this?
Well, I think that they're doing some things right. For instance, the mayor has been big on increasing the police presence in downtown where crime has spiked and increasing the number of cameras. But that is not enough on its own because, of course, we have to tackle the root cause of the problem as well. And the police chief in Windsor does not support a safe injection site, as many community members do. And so what I think we need to do is, yes, we need to tackle crime prevention with police officers and cameras, but I think we have to start funding mental health services more, and we have to start looking towards helping people find affordable housing more. And we have to have more outreach workers, I think, to really be able to tackle the problem. We'll never be addressing it the way we need to do if we only tackle the end result, the crime. We have to tackle it all. So I'd like to see the city do a little bit more with that, although, of course, I should point out that the issues that I just mentioned are very complex, difficult issues. So it's not an easy problem, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying.
Sure. Let's talk about, Janice, we're going to go into your bailiwick here. We're going to talk healthcare.
Yep.
Thunder Bay's been through it, Sudbury's been through it, North Bay's been through it. There are lots of mid-sized cities in this province that have gone through hospital consolidation and an attempt to build a mega hospital in order to treat everybody better. Windsor's going through this right now.
Yep.
Give us the background. What got us to this point?
Well, it's been a long story. So there are two hospital corporations in Windsor right now, Windsor Regional Hospital and Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare. I'm the CEO of the post-acute hospital. And probably about 7 or so years ago, I was recruited to Windsor to be the chief nurse at Hotel Dieu Grace, which was on Willette Avenue in the downtown core. Hotel Dieu was founded by the Religious Hospitallers of St. Joseph 130 years ago, this year, and still existing on that site, 125 years of history. But in order to position the community for a new investment in an acute care hospital, both hospitals had done capital planning, and the capital plans had gone into government, and renovations of the two existing and Hotel Dieu over 100-year facility was more, at the end of the day, than the work of coming together and doing a new acute care facility. So the boards of the two hospitals came together and said, we need to align services differently. And so Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare's board of directors left acute care and swapped hospitals and went to Prince Road in the West Windsor and walked away from 125 years of history on Willette Avenue and gave that over to Windsor Regional, the acute care hospital. And that thus began the work to be able to bring a new investment, a $2 billion investment to Windsor for a new acute care hospital.
$2 billion for a new hospital.
For the entire system. And so the new acute care hospital was what we started to work on when we actually aligned the hospitals. But what we ended up with was a hospital healthcare system transformation involving our hospital, community locations, as well as the acute care facility.
And where do things stand now?
Well, right now it's sitting with government. And part of the new acute care facility development has moved to stage 2 in the capital planning process, which freed up some dollars to do some functional planning and things like that. But government had some questions about some of the components of the system. So for instance, they asked Hotel Dieu, they asked us, could we take a look at renovated space instead of a new build for the acute mental health? Because all of mental health, which is currently across the two corporations, will come to our organization in this new planning process. And so we had to go through a process of taking a look at that and going through and engaging with our people. And we said, yeah, we could do renovated space instead of a new build. And the same conversation is happening right now with Windsor Regional looking at what they're calling an urgent care center in the downtown core.
Okay. Sean, I want to ask you about the location of the proposed new hospital. What's your view of it?
The location that's been proposed is in farmland, out past the airport. And Essex County has some of the best farmland in Canada, first of all. And Windsor has a lot of what are sometimes called brownfields, old industrial sites like the old GM transmission site, relatively close to downtown, huge spaces that need a $2 billion investment that could do incredible good to the city. You can imagine all the spin-off businesses that would happen. Windsor was built with incredible effort, time, and money over decades, over hundreds of years. And to kind of just let it go to waste and build something new, shining in a field far from where most of the people live, I think is a generational mistake that would haunt Windsor for a long time.
Craig, what's your take on where the hospital ought to be?
Well, it's interesting. The site selection committee for the hospital itself actually chose a different site as its preferred place, and it chose the site past the airport in a field as the second best site. The first one was on Tecumseh Road East. It's closer to the core. But part of the selection committee's criteria, they looked at 33 different issues, which was very detailed. They decided that in the end, if any of these hospital sites make the short list, then it would go with price. And at that point, of course, one that's in a field is likely to be cheaper than the one that's more in the city core. Now, I think we have to remember, though, that the hospital is to serve both Windsor and Essex County, and the proposed mega hospital site is closer to the county. There is a hospital out there in Leamington, but that's far out. So it's a difficult decision. I don't think that you would be able to find any site that would please everybody. I think that wherever you're going to choose to put it, it's going to cause some concern. This one has caused a lot of concern, but on the other hand, we do want to get a new mega hospital, and we do have to move on at some point with a decision.
Sarah, what's your view of where the new mega hospital should go?
So I think we definitely need a mega hospital. We definitely need to I work in a hospital, so we definitely need to update our services, and it is difficult for us to maintain the level of care that we need with the facilities that we currently have. I think whatever we do choose, there is someone who's going to be unhappy with it. So it is one of those things that we're going to have to move forward with what's the best decision for the majority of people in our region.
I want to know from you, Janice, about the point Sean was making, namely that if you put it closer to the downtown as opposed to out closer to the county, it has the added advantage of kind of kickstarting a whole renaissance in downtown that it clearly won't have if you put it out in a brownfield somewhere. Can you speak to that point?
Well, I think part of the conversation has been about, in our community in Windsor, has been about access and making sure that's one of the major criteria. So I wasn't involved in the site selection, but the site selection committee looked at a whole number of criteria around how do they choose where the site is. And I think Craig spoke to the idea that there were a number of sites and they looked all across and folks put their properties in. Wherever the hospital goes, one of the things that is really important for all of us to remember is we're building a hospital for not just today. This is a 50-year. And it's interesting because when we were going through the archives of the 125 years of history of Hotel Dieu on Willette Avenue, when the nuns bought the property and built the original hospital on Willette Avenue, they were criticized for being outside the town limits. And so I think
it's possible the city may grow to.
That's the intent. So this property was acquired from the county by the city many years ago, specifically for development. It has been marked for development for some time. And it is by the airport, and the city itself had provided some airport lands for consideration early in the process.
Does that make any sense to you, the notion that the city might actually grow to the hospital if you build it further away from the downtown?
Yeah, and Windsor is kind of sprawling slowly into the county, not with the same pressure as, say, the GTA. But I think it grows out into the county, into the farmland, at the expense of the parts of Windsor that have already been built and are sort of left to kind of gone fallow. And reinvesting in what we've already built, the pipes, the sewers, all the infrastructure, and the people that still live in downtown. You know, Windsor and Detroit have the similar economies, but Detroit kind of evacuated a lot of people. Windsor didn't evacuate so many people. People still live downtown. And if there's a chance to kind of prevent this kind of abandonment of what we see in other Rust Belt cities.
So take us ahead. If you did decide to build this hospital downtown at a location that you think is more inner city, and the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who would be coming to that hospital on a daily basis, what do you think that would do for the city? What's the missed opportunity here, I guess, is the question.
Well, you come in, you go visit if you're going to visit somebody, you go for lunch. You know, you might not want to eat at the hospital cafeteria, though they've always improved.
Ours is particularly good, actually, Sean, I'll tell you.
But you might want to walk down the street and get a sandwich somewhere, or you might want a gift, or you might want flowers, or you just might need a drink after you've been to been to see a relative in the hospital, and that will kind of spin off. It's like putting a stadium in downtown, or these kind of other mega projects. When you bring a lot of people into one spot, the kind of economic spin-offs will help all kinds of, like smaller scale businesses, mom and pops, the kind of diversified economy that the mayor of Windsor wants to get now.
Craig, I know it's a tough call, but do you see a missed opportunity here by building it out closer towards the county as opposed to in the inner city?
Well, had I been asked, I would have asked for it to be closer to the city core. And I think there's a number of reasons for that, especially given that there's such a large population downtown, and also a population that is lower income, and it's a little bit harder to get out to a far place, although they will be changing Transit Windsor so that there's buses that go out there. I should, though, say that it's not like it turned into Restaurant Row where the current hospitals are. In fact, there's really not that many restaurants around the hospitals now. So I'm not sure how many people come downtown and park in a parking lot and then start exploring Windsor or not. And there must be some of that, and I do think there's a slight missed opportunity. I do think that City Core Hospital has a lot to offer. But again, we are considering for the whole region. That's what makes the decision of where to place it tricky. Yeah. It is for the county, and the county is growing at a faster rate than what Windsor has been growing at. It's getting close now. Windsor still has more people than the county, though it's getting close, and the prediction is in that years to come, it'll be even closer, if not even, between the city and Essex County. It's a difficult choice. I would have chosen closer to the city core, but I do understand why the site was chosen.
Okay, let's put one more issue on the table here before our time runs out from underneath us, and that is, I want to talk about the guy that Wayne Gretzky says is the greatest hockey player who ever lived. and that's Gordie Howe. Because there's a new bridge that's going to be bearing his name with any luck in about 6 years' time. And Sarah, why don't I start with you on this one, since your dad's the one who commutes to Michigan every single day. The new Gordie Howe Bridge is supposed to be done by 2024. How hopeful are you, and I guess by extension your dad as well, that that's actually going to happen?
So my dad and his friends like to joke that either they're going to be dead or retired before the bridge is done. So we hope it'll get done soon, and I'm really happy to see that construction has started on both sides. Most people do not like the current bridge owner, the Ambassador Bridge. It's owned by a private billionaire from Detroit.
Matty Maroon.
It's expensive to cross. It's often under construction, so the lanes are restricted. It's, you're always stuck in traffic. There's sometimes accidents on the bridge, and it's one of your only options to cross between that and the tunnel, and the tunnel's under construction right now during nighttime. So we definitely want to see the bridge. It'll help reduce the truck traffic that comes throughout the city and pollutes the city as well, because they'll be able to go straight from the 401 onto the Gordie Howe Bridge and cross the border from there. So there's a lot of benefits with that new bridge, and I really hope we do live to see it and have its benefits in our community.
Well, my hunch is if you're one of the top 40 under 40, you're going to be alive to see it. I can't speak for the rest of us, but my hunch is you're going to be there to see it. Sean, let me try this. Some of the background to this is that, of course, it was the Stephen Harper government of Canada that decided that we needed another bridge across the Detroit River, and that when the United States started to complain about who's going to pay for it, Harper said, okay, we'll pay for the whole thing. Let's just get going. What's it looking like right now in terms of meeting that deadline of 2024?
I went to see the site when I was back in Windsor for Thanksgiving, and it's been clear that where it's going to land in Windsor. And it's like, wow, this thing is actually kind of coming along. And we built the extension of the 401. It's almost like meeting. You can almost visualize the bridge. But when Stephen Harper's government stepped up, it was kind of indicative of that relationship. Of when you go to Detroit, I was always amused that Detroiters, Southeast Michigan folk would always kind of look across and say, oh, there's Canada. Not Windsor, right? There's Canada. Whereas we in Windsor would know the suburb people are from and the intersection. So we pay a lot of attention to Detroit. They pay us a little bit of attention. So that decision for us to make sure the bridge goes through was very, very Canadian, very kind of Windsor, but very important to kind of hopefully knit these two intimate places together even more.
Well, let me follow up on that. Janice, let's not say if. When this bridge is finished, whenever that happens, how will it change Windsor?
I think it's going to add to the complexity of our community. So we've already benefited for a number of years by some construction getting ready for the bridge, the Herb Gray Parkway. My hospital, for instance, is in West Windsor, and part of the negotiations that have been happening have been around the idea of community benefits. So when you have a large infrastructure project like this, there is a requirement to work with the community around community benefits. And so things like protection of our Ojibwe Parkway, the Ojibwe Park lands. It's around the pollution that Sarah mentioned. It's around community renewal. So there's a community that is going to have a significant impact from the bridge, which is Sandwichtown. And so the West Windsor community has kind of come together and started to really articulate how will we work with the Bridge Authority? How will we work with making sure that the community is not negatively impacted, but is positively impacted by the bridge and by the construction and by the opening of the bridge in the timeline. And it's not just Windsor, it'll be Windsor and the Essex community because the ability to be able to have good, reliable connections to the United States is important.
Craig, I'm going to bring you in to talk about Matty Maroon. This is I think he's an octogenarian American, very rich guy who owns the Ambassador Bridge. And from what I hear, there's nobody in Windsor who likes him at all. Why is that?
Well, to say there's nobody, I'm not sure.
That might be an exaggeration. I haven't found anybody. Let's put it that way.
Right. Well, there are people who work at the Ambassador Bridge. Maybe they would be more supportive of him. There are people who have worked with him, I think. But I guess one of the issues is that obviously the Maroon family is concerned about their investment, the bridge, and they want to make as much money as possible for as long as possible. So they're not thinking necessarily about the community as much as we do in Windsor. And it's important for us that the community around the bridge continues to flourish and hopefully with an injection of a new bridge actually improve somewhat. And with the proposed Gordie Howe International Bridge, which I, by the way, believe fully is going to be built, there is a built-in mechanism to provide some funding to the community, which I think is great. And haven't said exactly what that's going to be, but I like to think there's going to be some community improvements. So I think it's plus, you know, the Maroons are American and they live on the U.S. side of the border, so they're not as concerned about it. But that said, they do keep up the property around the bridge fairly nicely. They have bought up a number of homes that have been boarded up. They would like to tear them down. The City of Windsor has prevented them from tearing down the majority of them, although lately they've been getting clearance to tear down more and more. Some of those homes looked terrible, but also some Windsor officials accused them of blockbusting, basically buying up homes and then shuttering them. And of course, that does not help the community do well at all. The Ambassador Bridge argues, well, hey, let us tear it down, it'll look better. And the Windsor community argues, well, if you hadn't bought them and boarded them up in the first place, there wouldn't be such an issue. As these things go, it's complex. I would love to see that new bridge built, though. I would love to see another option for people to cross between Windsor and Detroit. I think it's going to be a great bridge. The drawings certainly make it look gorgeous. And I think it'll be good for Windsor when it does open. Okay,
Sean, let me try this with you. There's going to be a documentary immediately following this program on the whole Windsor-Detroit relationship. And one of the expressions used in the documentary, it describes Windsor as a suburb of Detroit. Mm-hmm. As a guy who's from Windsor, how do you take that?
I think it's true. I don't think it's a pejorative. I think you know, Detroit's the big 5 million person beast, and Windsor's the 250 or so thousand kind of smaller. And I think it's important to recognize that that really close family relationship that these two places have, despite having this kind of sometimes annoying international border in between it. Like if the bridge, the new bridge is supposed to get, there's a plan maybe for bike lanes. I could imagine people riding your bike over to Detroit and vice versa, just kind of making it easier for this kind of relationship to happen. I think a lot of time Windsor always kind of was had our backup. You know, we are different than Detroit, but I think it's like, you know, be together, you know, and kind of embrace that relationship and celebrate it and maybe capitalize on it.
Do you find it odd, Janice, to have a city in a completely different country, separated by water, described as a suburb of Detroit?
It took a bit of getting used to when I moved to Windsor. I had never thought of Windsor that way. Actually, to be honest with you, it wasn't something that I even considered when I took the job in Windsor, was that it was so close to Detroit. But one of the things that's a real benefit as a health professional is the opportunities in terms of cross-border collaborations around health. And so we've had some really interesting conversations around how do you do some health research on inner city populations with one health system in the United States and one health system in Canada? They're so very different.
Oh my gosh, are they ever?
There are so many opportunities to take a look at inner city populations and mental health, addictions, homelessness, and some of the challenges of poverty from within the social safety nets that are so very different in the two countries. And so those things excite me, and I think they excite a lot of us. We have a wonderful university, University of Windsor, that's really doing some interesting collaborations across the river. So I think the idea of a suburb is one thing. It's the sub part of suburb that gets me. It's always somehow less than.
Let me give Sarah the last 30 seconds of our discussion here, and that is, you're a young person who, for the moment, has decided to stay in Windsor. And I wonder if you would tell us why it makes sense for young people to stay and make their life in Windsor today.
Sure. I think one of the biggest things is you can afford to live in Windsor. If you do manage to find a well-paying job in Windsor, you can buy a house, which is not necessarily the case in a lot of other bigger cities. You do have access to Detroit. Again, I agree. I think it's an asset. You can be in the border in 10, 15 minutes and be at a show or a game or shopping in the States. And then there's a lot to do in Windsor. There's a wonderful community here. Even though we are a city, we have that small town kind of feel where you do get to know people, you know your neighbors, you know the community, and you can get to know your city officials and things like that as well. So it's a great place to raise a family, and it's a great place to grow a family and to give back in ways that you can't necessarily do in a larger city where you might get lost in the shuffle.
Boy, the Chamber of Commerce should hire you. That's a great pitch for that town, I gotta say. I want to thank everybody for appearing on our program tonight. Sarah Mushtag and Craig Pearson down there in southwestern Ontario in Windsor for us. Janice Caffer from Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare, and Sean McAuliffe, the Windsor guy originally, now with the Toronto Star. Great to have you two here in our studio as well.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.